Good morning, Janice.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well. Let's talk about how to buy a house in your 20s. What did you think of this one?
I thought it was pretty interesting. A concept of buying a house in the 20s isn't something that a lot of people think about. So it is really good information and gets you started thinking about it.
Just to be clear, they're talking about somebody who's in their age of the 20s, not the 2020s decade, correct?
Correct.
Okay, just making
Correct.
sure.
Correct. Yeah. When you're in that first part of life, when you're just getting out on your own, they're talking about this is how you could buy a house.
And I just want to point out that this theme coincides with the recent launch of my book, How to Buy Your Perfect First Home, available on Amazon. We'd be appreciative if you went and checked it out.
Yeah, it's great. It has so much information. I really liked it.
Cool. Why don't you get us started, Jay?
Okay, so the author breaks it down into different sections. And the first thing she talks about is how to buy a house in your 20s, saving for a down payment. So she talks about that most home buyers make a down payment accounting for 20% of the price of a home. On a typical $25,000 house, that could be $50,000. So they talk about how to do that with increasing, your savings. And of course, they did mention here about asking mom and dad, which I don't know about you, that wouldn't go very well. But they talk about just trying to save up for that. But in my thinking, which might be different from yours, in your 20s, saving $50,000 seems like a really big task. Maybe you have different opinions about the percentages, but that seems like that would scare me right off the bat of, oh boy, 50,000. Okay, no house till I'm 30.
Well, I think the point of pointing out the 20% sort of rule of thumb is to maybe it doesn't have to be 50,000, right? Those are the absolute numbers. It could be to lower your horizons a little bit. Instead of going for the full on house, maybe get a smaller apartment or a starter home, something along those lines, which I think we'll get into later. But you don't want to over leverage yourself, I think might be the point here. You don't want to try to get in with zero money down or 3% down and have this onerous mortgage.
Right. Realistically, why look at houses if you can't do it, if you can't save even just a little bit up for even a smaller percentage. So they're saying to save, which is a good thing to start doing anyway, house or not.
Right on.
She talks about shore up student loan debt. So personally, and I'm sure you probably were in the same boat, student loan debt, if you went to college, you have it. They said here that the average is $28,000 per borrower. That seems really low. So I'd be interested to see if that's correct. That seems pretty low. But mortgage lenders, she was saying, require a borrower's debt to income ratio. So it might not automatically prevent you from being able to buy a house by having student loan debt, but it's something that you want to keep in mind. I said she, I'm sorry, I meant he, because this is by Daniel Bortz. He mentioned that one way to make room is to refinance and extend the life of your college loan. I believe we talked about this before, though, is you want to make sure that if you're going to do any refinancing or anything with your money at all, you need to make and be sure of the timing. You don't want to do that right before you're going to go in and work on a loan application for a home. What do you think about that?
Sure. This seems to tie in with a more general advice of just making sure your debt to income ratio is okay. And I guess they're pointing out student loans because that would be more relevant or applicable to somebody in their 20s, probably one of their bigger debt items. But yeah, you want to have a good ratio, and there are rules of thumb in terms of what amount of debt payments you can have on a recurring monthly payment on a recurring monthly basis. Excuse me.
Yes.
Relative to your recurring monthly income. And there are these sort of rules of thumb, and if you're over the rule or over the threshold, it's going to be much tougher to get a mortgage. And if you can do anything such as, like as you mentioned, refinancing your debt or doing some big pay downs, that'll really help you in terms of getting a mortgage.
Absolutely, and that leads right into the next one of checking your credit score. So home buyers in their 20s, they tend to have shorter credit histories, but in that short amount of time, anything can happen. So it's important, they say, to check your credit report annually, because you do get that free annual credit report. The information's inside of the article. But you want to check for errors, make sure there aren't any. If you really did make all your payments on time, you want to make sure that one isn't showing that you have 6 months of missed payments. That's pretty bad. But you definitely want to check. and make sure that your credit score is actually the score it's supposed to be.
Right. I don't know about you, but during my college years and law school years, actually, I don't know, my credit card debt was a little, I guess you could say, out of control. I mean, it's fine now, but...
I completely agree with you.
I mean,
Yes.
those credit card companies know that you're in your early 20s and you don't know what you're doing. And they offer you like all this access to this money that you never would have had before. It's kind of scary.
It is. And I can personally say that's the same thing. You go to college and you get, I remember they had a college fair and one of the major companies for the credit card was there. Fill out an application, get a free t-shirt or something similar.
Yeah, they give you a lot of pretty cool stuff. Yeah.
Right. So you did. And then you get it in the mail and it's like, wow, you've got a $10,000 limit. Okay. But they don't really necessarily prepare you for the fact that you're late one time or if you rack up too much. So it is pretty scary right around that, I would say that college time. If you don't know how to handle a credit card or credit, it could lead to problems almost instantly. It's like you said, buying a home in your 20s.
So like you said, as long as you didn't miss any payments and the repayment obligation doesn't completely throw your debt to income ratio out of whack, you should be okay. So just make sure that your credit score is good and accurately reflects that you're an honest repayment, responsible repayer.
Yep, just make sure they're on time. And I think if we had more education around that time to make sure you paid on time, make sure you paid on time, I think that the credit scores would ultimately be a little bit better. Then they talk about purchasing a starter home. You mentioned this earlier. Your first home in your 20s might not necessarily be your forever home. You want to look at it as this is your first home. It's not your last. So you don't want to go into it trying to get your $500,000 home. I'm talking about in the suburbs, not the city. And really bury yourself in this house when, just go for the starter home. Just get in there, build your credit, learn how home buying can go, and then down the road when you're ready, then go for that big forever home.
Yeah, I talk about this a little bit in my book. You want to be so there's a minimum amount of time you want to be in a property. I mean, at a bare minimum, you should want to keep it for 5 years. Ideally closer to 10. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of transactional costs each time you buy and sell. So anything shorter than that, and your transactional cost will most likely, eat up any profit you would have made on the sale of your home over that period. But that aside from that, I mean, you probably just can't afford your dream home yet.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just
not yet. Soon it'll happen, but you should just be pretty excited that you own a home in your 20s, even if it's a smaller one, and it's not the white picket fence that you'll have eventually. But it's a really great way to start.
Yeah, and in Manhattan, it'll be more like in your 20s, you're probably going to want the studio or one bedroom in a hipper neighborhood like Chelsea or the Meatpacking District or whatever. But, it's tougher to raise kids there. So in 5 to 10 years, you'll probably upgrade from that unit to something in a more residential area or leave for the suburbs. I mean, that's kind of the typical path. Yeah.
Exactly. Just go with it. You're in your 20s. Go with what you can do and don't set yourself out. Which brings to the final point that he makes is plan for unexpected home expenses. So you do not want to buy at the top of the budget because you're going to have to pay for, emergency home repairs. It says here roof damage, gas leak. There's a lot of things that could happen, and you don't want to go in at the top of your budget. You have nothing now in savings. You lose and you damage part of your roof. What are you going to do? That's a pretty big problem that you have to account for before you go into it. One of the very last part that he mentions, which I find would be a very good thing, is home buyers want to get a home warranty. Now, when we buy houses around here in the suburbs, usually, or they kind of build that into it, but the home warranty comes with the first year. So personally, I know that we did that on our home, but we've kept it ever since, and it has been a lifesaver. Even though you do have to prepare for everything, it's really nice to have something that can help you.
That's interesting. I don't think I'm not sure, but I don't think there's anything similar to that in the city. You don't have roof issues, or when you buy an apartment like a condo or co-op, you don't have those types of issues. But you do have other things come up. Don't get lackadaisical there. The HVAC units is often a big problem, meaning the air conditioning heating units that go through the wall. windows. That's your responsibility, even though it's part of the exterior of the building. So if the frame, I don't know what happens, it kind of comes out of whack and you have to reseal it, and that's actually kind of expensive. That's on you. And because you're living in a building, you might have things like a leak from an upstairs neighbor that kind of causes problems for you downstairs. Depending on how things shake out, that might be an expense that you at the very least have to pay for out of pocket up front before you can get reimbursed later from either insurance or from the neighbor or from the condo itself. So the expenses do exist for apartments. It's just because you don't have a backyard or a roof doesn't mean that you're good to go. That this definitely applies to Manhattan as well.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, the home warranty is something that originally when we got, you think, we won't need that. Well, upon moving in, we had to fix quite a few different even appliances that broke or malfunctioned and would lead to bigger problems. So I'm glad that we had something like that. So it's just something to look into and also plan for the unexpected financially.
Very good. That's a nice article. The five things on how to buy a house in your 20s. Thank you to Realtor.com. Thank you to Daniel Bortz. Janice, talk to you next time.
Talk to you soon.